Exposed. How one maid's incredible act transformed a billionaire CEO's life forever. Emily pushed her cart down the plush corridor of the penthouse suite, the air thick with the weight of unspoken memories. She'd scrubbed hundreds of hotel rooms, but this one gleamed with an aura of excess and despair that enveloped her. A glimpse of her reflection caught in the polished door, hair pulled tight, uniform fresh yet worn, didn't mirror the strength she fought to hold. Her heart raced as she recalled Lily's bright smile, her daughter's future an ever-looming specter. A college education for Lily was just a dream, but it was one Emily tied her entire existence to. Tonight, she was alone in tackling the sins of a billionaire, the famous Jack Sullivan. She couldn't shake the unease curling in her stomach as the elevator doors opened. The stories whispered about him floated through the hotel like steam. The reckless decisions, the scandals, the fall from grace. As she stepped inside the opulent suite, her breath caught, but her resolve strengthened. She wasn't there to bow down to wealth. She was there to work, and for her daughter. Jack sat hunched, the flickering light of the skyline barely illuminating his face. It was a far cry from the powerful man he portrayed in the boardroom. Guilt hung on him like a shroud. Shadows danced across his features, reflecting the burdens he carried. She felt a lurch in her stomach, a sense of deep empathy flooding in, but she didn't come here to commiserate. Emily gripped her dust cloth tighter, a dilemma twisting in her gut. Did she dare confront him? "Don't you care about what you stand for?" The words slipped past her lips, raw and unfiltered. His head snapped up, surprise glinting in his eyes. Moments passed like hours, tension swelling between them. Jack's world had built walls so tall, yet here she was, a simple maid, challenging him to see his own reflection, unscathed by glittering accolades. Her voice trembled slightly, adrenaline surging, fragile and fierce. The moral weight of her challenge hung thick in the air. Jack's amusement twisted into something darker, tighter. "What would you know about my life?" A simple question, but it ricocheted through the fears that shrouded her daily existence. He was right. She had yet to walk a mile in his designer shoes, yet she'd lived the truth of struggle and sacrifice. All the while, the potential for a future that offered both honor and happiness gleamed like a distant star. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But Emily's pulse quickened. His skepticism wasn't what she had anticipated. Her heart raced with the urgency of a ticking clock, every second laying bare the consequences of their moment. Could she believe in him? In this connection kindled in a maelstrom of vulnerability and defiance? Shadows flickered behind his steely facade. Was it remorse or just fear? Jack's silence consumed the space between hope and despair. Just then, the tension cracked like ice beneath her feet. The phone rang, snatching him back into his reality, a reminder of looming threats ready to engulf him whole. The whisper of betrayal and scandal threatened to unravel everything he once thought he was. Emily stood at the precipice, caught between a man grappling with moral decay and a future she fought for fiercely. But would the heart of a single mother heal a fractured billionaire? Would Jack's choices find redemption amidst the chaos they both faced? The air around them thickened with possibility, a moment teetering on the brink of fate. As Jack faced the depths of his past, Emily steeled herself for the tumult ahead, uncertain of the path but determined to challenge both their destinies. Would they sink or rise above it all? The tension suspended them in a question with no easy answer, both naive yet ready to fight for what lay ahead. Emily held her breath as Jack reached for the phone, the tension in the room palpable. She had momentarily pierced the armor surrounding him, but now doubt threatened to suffocate that fragile connection. Would her boldness fade into silence, lost in the din of his corporate world? The conversation was short, a barrage of clipped words and curt responses, reality crashing back around them. Jack's gaze flickered back to her, the faintest trace of the vulnerability he had shown replaced by the cool facade of the businessman she had heard about. She could see him shifting, retreating behind the walls he had meticulously built. "Can you give me a moment?" he prompted, voice clipped. The professional tone cut through the quiet. As he shifted his attention back to the phone, Emily felt her resolve falter. She was reminded of her station, the invisible lines drawn between the worlds they inhabited. The chasm between their realities loomed, but she was not ready to retreat. Steeling herself, she approached his desk, a grand setup that seemed to mock her smallness. "You can't just brush this aside. You have to confront your truth, Jack." Her words were firm, infused with the weight of her own experiences. She could no longer stay silent as if she didn't exist in this space. He hung up abruptly, disbelief mingling with anger. "You think you can lecture me on truth?" Emily squared her shoulders, unwavering. "You think you can hide behind success and wealth? It doesn't define who you are." His eyes flared with indignation, but she could see the flicker of introspection behind that bluster. Jack Sullivan was used to people bowing to his authority, yet here a maid challenged him, not with bitterness, but with sincerity. It caught him off guard. "Why do you care?" he demanded, bravado melting slightly into something softer beneath the surface. "Because I've seen what happens when people turn their backs on their purpose. I do this job for my daughter. Her future means everything. You're squandering your potential, Jack." The back and forth ebbed like a tide, each exchange revealing layers, vulnerabilities, and raw truths. She could sense the weight of his choices permeating the air. Jack's shoulders sagged, his bravado cleaving like a cracked mirror. "What's your purpose, Emily? Just surviving?" A small flame of determination ignited within her, pushing her forward. "No. I aim to thrive, for myself and for my daughter. That means confronting the unvarnished truths we'd rather ignore," she said, her voice steady. In that moment, Emily felt a shift. Her words were not just about saving Jack. They echoed her own aspirations for growth, peace, and the better life she yearned to create for Lily. Jack appeared to ponder her sentiment, the wall between them wavering. "Maybe the truth isn't what I thought it was," he muttered, almost to himself. She sensed an awakening. The steeliness that marked his brow now loosened, revealing a man caught in a web of his own making. Suddenly the door swung open, rattling their moment. A sharp-suited assistant burst in, urgency radiating from every pore. "Jack, we need you in the conference room, now." The command sliced through the air like a knife. Jack's conflict flared again, the pressures of corporate life clutching him fiercely. His own ambitions weighed against a newfound introspection. Would he now take a step back to examine the choices leading to this discontent? Emily fought the instinct to retreat, unwilling to let this encounter dissolve. "Think about what you really want. The world only sees your wealth, but they don't see the man you can become." Jack's expression hardened for a fleeting breath, but then, almost imperceptibly, a flicker of understanding crossed his features. He paused, and their eyes locked in a moment that felt like destiny, one filled with unfulfilled potential. As he turned reluctantly toward the door, Emily felt a shifting within herself. Could this moment mark a turning point, not just for him, but for her? The fear of being unseen began to unravel as she realized the power of her own voice. "Jack," she called as he hesitated. "Can you make it count?" He nodded slowly, uncertainty still laced in his expression, but edged with the beginnings of purpose. As he vanished through the door, a rush of urgency swirled inside her. She had challenged a billionaire, but would that be enough to change their paths? Would he wrestle with the truth, or would he slip back into the shadows of his past? The world outside called to her as she stood before the crumbling walls of uncertainty. The determination to rise for Lily surged once more, stronger than any doubt that loomed. She was on the precipice of transformation, not just for Jack, but also for herself. Emily turned to face the sprawling cityscape outside the window, her heart racing with possibilities. Could she unlock hidden doors within her own life? The path ahead flickered with uncertainty, but no longer did fear dictate her direction. But just then a chilling thought pierced her resolve. What if Jack's journey back to himself meant her stepping away from everything she had planned for Lily? The conflict twisted deep within her as she pondered the stakes. As the shadows stretched long across the suite, she realized she stood on the verge of a choice, one that would require confronting her own past and heart's desires, calling her to decide what truly mattered in this dance of fate. Would she have the courage to embrace the uncertain path ahead? And with that thought, the impending question loomed, weighing heavily. How far would she go to ensure both their lives found the redemption they craved? The city pulsated with life beyond the glass, but within the suite, shadows whispered around Emily. Each passing second felt thick with expectation. She had opened the door to an exploration that might demand more from her than she had anticipated. Questions churned like a tempest in her mind. If Jack embraced his truth, would that mean she had to confront her own failures, dreams dashed against the reality of her life? She stepped away from the window, the urgency of her interaction with Jack beginning to crystallize into purpose. The world had flickered before her, revealing the intricacies of her situation. She was a maid, a role born of necessity, yet within it lay both her burden and her power. In this moment of self-reflection, she found a surge of determination fueled by the thought of Lily. Emily walked over to the small desk tucked against the wall. A battered notebook and a pencil sat waiting, reminders of her aspirations buried beneath the weight of responsibilities. This space, once just a workspace, became her canvas. She took a deep breath and began to write, her thoughts flowing onto the pages like a stream breaking free from winter's grip. If she could confront fear and advocate for Jack, why couldn't she do the same for herself? What did she truly want? As the pencil scratched against paper, visions of a better life started to take shape. A chance to go back to school, to finish her education. It hadn't just been a dream. It was an imperative she had set aside long ago, smothered under the need to survive. 2 months had passed since she had first arrived at the Sullivan estate. She had entered the mansion as a means to support Lily, but perhaps this role now offered more than just a paycheck. Emily pondered the shift. Just as Jack had been challenged to redefine himself, maybe she too was being called to rise to meet her own destiny. As she penned ideas and structured plans for her future, the rhythm of the city faded, pulling her deeper into this world she was constructing. She could build a life filled with purpose. But what if the more she reached for this new path, the further away she drifted from her current reality, or from Jack? The tension built like a crescendo waiting to break. Her thoughts were interrupted by the unmistakable sound of heels clicking decisively outside the door. The assistant was back, her expression carrying a different weight this time. Emily's heart raced. She had no idea how much of the previous conversation had echoed in the corridors of influence. The assistant entered, and her eyes quickly assessed the room, landing on Emily. "Jack wants to meet with you again," she stated. "This time it's about something more urgent." There was a vested intensity in her tone, suggesting uncharted territories yet to be explored. "More urgent?" Emily echoed, confusion wrestling with curiosity. She didn't realize Jack would seek her out again. Perhaps he had been reflecting after their earlier confrontation. What could he possibly need from her now? "Yes, he thinks you can help him with a project, something outside of the boardroom," the assistant explained, her sharp demeanor softening slightly. Emily could sense that the stakes were higher than before, that this was no mere appointment but the beginning of something profound. Intrigued yet apprehensive, Emily's mind raced. What kind of project? What could a billionaire possibly need from her? Was this an opportunity to deepen the transformation she had started, or would it unearth more complexities than she was prepared to handle? "Are you ready for this?" the assistant prodded. Emily felt her pulse quicken, heart racing with every potential path laid out before her. She was teetering on the edge of transformation, not just for Jack, but for herself, a promise to reclaim her own life. She took a moment to center her thoughts, feeling the weight of every unfulfilled desire mingling with hope. This was a pivotal moment, and she knew it. It was time to embrace change and step confidently into the unknown. "Yes," she said, the word catching in her throat before escaping as a whisper of determination. "I'm ready." At that moment, unknown worlds of possibility unfurled before her. As Emily followed the assistant out of the suite, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a threshold, one that would require everything she had to give. This was not just a meeting. It was a chance to influence not only Jack's path, but her own as well. Would this partnership propel them both toward redemption, or would the journey reveal hidden obstacles neither of them could foresee? As they moved through the sleek halls of the mansion, the question lingered like electricity in the air. What awaited her on the other side of this venture, and how much of herself was she truly willing to stake in the outcome? The corridors of the Sullivan estate felt different now. Each step echoed with intention, a rhythmic drumbeat of change that stirred Emily's pulse. She followed the assistant, whose heels clicked with a commanding clarity, as they made their way toward a conference room poised for strategic conversation. Emily could feel the gravity of the moment settling over her like a heavy cloak. The air felt charged, thick with potential and unspoken possibilities. Inside the room, Jack stood at the head of the polished table, scribbling notes on a legal pad, his brow furrowed with determination. He appeared to be in another world at that moment, perhaps lost in a labyrinth of formulas and figures that governed his corporate empire. But when he looked up and met Emily's gaze, there was a flicker of warmth, an acknowledgement of shared struggles and a recognition that transcended their differing statuses. "Thank you for coming, Emily," he said, his voice deep and resonant. Despite the formal setting, there was an undercurrent of vulnerability in his tone, a raw honesty that invited trust. "Of course," she replied, battling the butterflies in her stomach. Her resolve strengthened with every heartbeat. This wasn't merely about him. It was about them both stepping into uncharted territory, inviting change into their lives. Jack gestured to an empty seat. "I want to discuss a new initiative I'm launching. It's about creating a community outreach program that prioritizes education for underprivileged children. Your insights could be invaluable." A sliver of surprise sliced through Emily's apprehension. He needed her advice? As if reading her thoughts, Jack continued, "You mentioned your past aspirations. I believe you have a unique perspective that could shape what this program becomes. It's not just another charity. I want it to enact real change." The weight of his sincerity clashed with her own doubts, forming a cocktail of exhilaration and fear. Could she really contribute to something so significant? Doubts twisted inside her, recalling every moment of disillusionment and the gnawing feeling of inadequacy that had accompanied her choices. Yet, here was an opportunity to transform not only her future, but also the futures of others. "What do I know about designing outreach programs?" she asked, the tremor in her voice betraying her internal struggle. "I've never—" "You've lived it," Jack interjected, his gaze unwavering. "You understand firsthand what these children face. Isn't that more valuable than knowledge from textbooks? We need raw insight, something real." His words ignited a fire within her. The moment of exposure was daunting. She was indeed an expert in navigating hardship and dreaming big amid constraints. She could apply her lived experience in ways she had never considered. Suddenly, the vision she had sketched out in her notebook became more than ink on pages. It morphed into an outline of action, an opportunity to drive change that resonated with her deepest desires. "What do you need from me?" Emily asked, determination flooding her voice as the possibility of agency began to saturate her consciousness. Jack leaned forward, excitement illuminating the shadows in his eyes. "Everything. Your authenticity, your insights, your voice. We're building something together. I want you to co-lead this with me." Emily's heart raced at the prospect, battling against the shadow of self-doubt. The risks loomed larger. What if she failed? The specter of inadequacy lingered, whispering that perhaps she wasn't enough. Yet, alongside that fear, a resolute force summoned her courage. The realization that by putting herself forward, she was inching closer to the life she wanted, and to the mother her daughter needed. As they brainstormed ideas, discussing everything from mentorships to after-school programs, possibilities unfolded before her like the petals of a flower daring to bloom. Emily felt a shift within her, a growing belief in her skills and experiences. Each suggestion she vocalized seemed to solidify not only a pathway for others, but also her own journey toward reclamation. Hours passed, but neither noticed the clock. They moved buoyantly through brainstorming sessions, vulnerability simmering in the air, each idea igniting the next until both lost track of time. Eventually, as she prepared to leave, Jack said, "This is just the beginning, Emily. You're far more powerful than you realize. Don't ever doubt your impact." Walking out of that room, Emily felt lighter. The weight of uncertainty had transformed into purpose. She was no longer standing on the periphery of her own life. She was stepping firmly into the narrative, ready to weave her story of redemption into the tapestry of others. But as she reached the door, a chilling thought struck her. What if the changes they were about to embark upon brought unforeseen challenges that could not only reshape her future, but also threaten the hard-won ground she had gained? The questions loomed, echoing within her mind. Was she fully prepared for the tumult ahead, and how far would she need to venture to find the answers she sought? The complexity of her fate shimmered with heat. With a deep breath filled with both trepidation and excitement, she stepped forward into an uncertain tomorrow, ready to face whatever might come next. The next few days unfolded like a fever dream, with Emily oscillating between inspired determination and abrupt bouts of anxiety. The weight of Jack's expectations bore down on her, yet simultaneously propelling her forward into a new realm of professional responsibility. Each morning brought forth the question of whether she would meet the challenge ahead or succumb to her lingering self-doubt. Her thoughts raced as she diligently outlined a framework for the outreach program. Each proposal was steeped in passion, reflecting the childhood struggles she had endured, the torn sneakers, the overcrowded classrooms, the gnawing uncertainty that had colored her formative years. This wasn't merely an assignment. It felt like unearthing pieces of herself that she had buried long ago. Emily scrutinized the data Jack had provided, diving into research on successful educational initiatives. The truths she uncovered were invigorating. Underachievement could often be traced back to systemic failures, economic limitations, and lack of access, truths that resonated deeply with her. She could draw from these insights to empower others, but insecurity crept in. Had her experience given her enough credibility to guide this project? On the fourth day, she sat across from Jack in his sleek office, her head buzzing with information and excitement. He leaned back in his chair, a flicker of anticipation in his eyes as he summarized their brainstorming sessions and pointedly emphasized the potential impact of their work. "Emily, we're in the early stages of something significant," he said, his voice laden with earnest ambition. "I've secured the board's interest, and they're eager to see us present a detailed proposal." As he spoke, the pit in her stomach grew heavier. The stakes were rising, transforming what had once felt manageable into a daunting mountain to scale. Before she could engage fully in the conversation, doubts bubbled to the surface. "But if we fail, Jack, what then? What kind of advocate am I if I lead this initiative and it falls short? What if I don't have the answers when it matters?" Jack's brow furrowed momentarily, the warmth in his demeanor replaced by a seriousness that demanded attention. "Failure happens. It's part of the process. What's crucial is how we respond to those moments. Your perspective is vital, and it's okay to be scared. That only means you care." Her initial instinct was to recoil. Vulnerability had never felt like a badge of honor. But beneath the surface, something stirred, a belief that perhaps confronting fear was a necessary step forward. Her heart raced with the realization that leaning into her vulnerability might provide the very strength she needed to be effective. As they began drafting their proposal, weaving together ideas of mentorships, resources, and partnerships, Emily started to visualize how their initiative could reshape the landscape of underprivileged education. The act of translating her passion into actionable steps struck her deeply. It solidified her sense of purpose, turning abstract fears into concrete actions. Later that evening, Emily stood in her kitchen, preparing dinner as her daughter completed her homework at the table. The faint smell of sautéed vegetables filled the air, wrapping around Emily like a reminder of normalcy amidst the chaos she was creating in her professional life. Her daughter looked up, an innocent question drifting through the tension. "Mom, are you going to fix schools?" Taken aback, Emily hesitated, the gravity of her daughter's inquiry sinking in. It wasn't just about crafting programs anymore. It was about inspiring hope and validating struggle through action. "I hope to make it better for kids like you," she replied, her voice steadying, anchoring herself to the clarity of her newfound mission. Then, as her daughter beamed with the untainted belief of youth, a thought flashed in Emily's mind, a realization that danger could hide in success as much as in failure. Could this venture expose her to new disappointments, not just personally, but also as a mother? Could her drive to succeed jeopardize her ability to be present with her child? Her resolve hardened, and questions circled ominously. How would she balance her heart's ambitions against the unconditional commitments to motherhood? In that moment of clarity, she felt herself teetering on the edge of transformation, caught between what she had always known and the uncharted waters of her evolving identity. Just as she began to formulate a plan, the shadows of doubt crept back in, whispering promises of what could go wrong. The challenge was not only about leading a project. It was a maze of intersecting identities, mother, advocate, and the woman finally reclaiming her voice. As she turned to check on her daughter, the fervor of the unknown weighed heavily in the air, ready to push her into the depths of her next confrontation. And as night fell, it was clear. The true struggle had only just begun. What lay ahead was yet to unfold, a confrontation with her own perception of success and the potential fallout of her choices. Would she have the fortitude to withstand the storms ahead and emerge renewed? Or would she fold under the weight of expectations? With a newfound determination, she whispered to herself the promise that tomorrow would greet her with greater clarity, even in the face of uncertainty. And as she imagined what tomorrow might bring, the thrill of the unknown filled her with apprehension and a driving urgency, pushing her to confront a defining moment she could not yet predict. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window as Emily wrestled with her thoughts, brewing coffee while snippets of yesterday's conversation clung to her mind. She had resolved to push through the fear, yet the heaviness began to settle again. The sheer weight of responsibility ignited worry in her chest. Would she truly be able to reshape the educational experience for the children she had once been, those battling against the odds like she had? As the coffee dripped, she glanced at her reflection in the kitchen window. Determination flickered in her eyes, mingled with a hint of doubt. It was clear, this was more than a project. It was a mission deeply woven into the fabric of her identity. Today, the real testing ground awaited her, her first presentation to the board. Though she had practiced her points countless times, a persistent undercurrent of anxiety lurked just beneath the surface. By midday, she found herself seated in the sleek boardroom, an imposing environment where the polished professionalism of the executives was palpable. Jack sat beside her, exuding calm confidence, but even he couldn't shield her from the mounting tension that prickled against her skin. The agenda was set, but as she waited for her moment to speak, her mind began to spiral. What if her voice faltered? What if her passion appeared childish? What if the board rejected her vision? With each tick of the clock, Emily reflected on the balance that lay ahead. Presenting this proposal didn't merely involve sharing statistics or strategic plans. It demanded she lay bare her beliefs, her experiences, her very soul. When her name was called, she stood, feeling the weight of the room's expectations settle on her shoulders. As she began to speak, the words felt foreign, yet familiar, the rhythm of her childhood experiences intricately interwoven within her presentation. She spoke passionately about the framework they had developed, each initiative echoing the wounds of her past and the hopes for a better future for children. But mid-presentation, her nerves erupted, and a block took grip of her mind. The room full of expectant faces seemed to converge upon her, ready to dissect every word. She stumbled awkwardly over a statistic and caught Jack's concerned glance. The crack in her confidence widened as whispers of doubt trickled in, disrupting her flow. What if she misrepresented the potential impact? What if they turned against her? Then, amidst the chaos of her spiraling thoughts, a memory flickered to the forefront. Her daughter's trusting eyes, brimming with expectation. It struck her then. This was about them, the children without voices who battled against unseen barriers. Focusing her energy, she inhaled deeply, grounding herself in that purpose. "Children deserve better," she declared, her voice steadier now. "They deserve mentors who believe in them, resources that equip them not only with knowledge, but the will to thrive." There was a fervor that rose from within her, an undeniable connection to the mission that surged through every part of her being. The boardroom transformed in that moment, the sterile atmosphere thickening with purpose. She noticed the shift in their expressions. Curiosity evolved into engagement. Emily continued, borrowing strength from her vulnerabilities, recognizing that sharing her fears made her proposal all the more powerful. By the time she concluded, breaths were held as she laid out a path forward and opened the floor for discussions. Rather than anticipating rejection, she felt a burgeoning hope. Perhaps they could see her heart beating through the data, each beat pulsating with her convictions. But just as she started to relax, a board member posed a pointed question about a particular aspect of her proposal. "What happens if your strategies don't achieve the expected outcomes?" He leaned forward, scrutinizing her with an intensity that paralleled her worst fears. Emily felt her heart quicken as she pondered his words. She had rehearsed for this moment, yet it did not prepare her for the revelation that threatened to crumble her newfound confidence. The question dug deeper than mere professional critique. It exposed her own uncertainties about success. Could she admit that failure was a possibility, while simultaneously arguing for action? Taking a breath, she decided to confront the heart of her fear instead of deflecting. "Failure is a possibility," she said, her acknowledgement echoing within the room. "But so is growth, and it's through this process that we learn what truly works. My past taught me resilience, and that failure builds momentum towards meaningful change." The atmosphere shifted yet again. Others leaned in, absorbing her vulnerability. She had gone from fearing judgment to fostering a dialogue that embraced honesty and curiosity. As discussions deepened after the presentation, the realization gripped her like an electric current. This wasn't just a professional endeavor. It was an evolution of her understanding of success, failure, and what it meant to be truly exposed in her aspirations. The day had offered her a taste of confrontation that ran deeper than a boardroom. It was a confrontation within herself, yet, despite the growing sense of validation, uncertainty still loomed large ahead. Would this moment define her as an advocate, or would the specter of failure linger too closely, testing her resolve once more? With their feedback seeming promising, the ticking clock pressed on, reminding her that what lay ahead might jeopardize everything she had just fought for. As the meeting adjourned, she caught Jack's eye, a shared smile of camaraderie illuminating the space. Yet beneath that gleam she felt the heavy pulse of another imminent challenge whispering. She had faced one hurdle today, but the road ahead was rife with unpredictable turns, and somehow she knew soon the true test of her confidence would await her around the next corner. The days following the board meeting felt like a blur, a mixture of adrenaline and trepidation painting each moment. Emily returned to her routine, but her mind was still spiraling around the revelations of that day. The feedback from the board had been encouraging, but with encouragement came the weight of expectation. She found herself questioning whether she could sustain this momentum and deliver on the hopes she had sparked. At the office, her colleagues recognized the shift in her demeanor. Conversations about her presentation buzzed around her like bees, both a warm embrace and a buzzing reminder of her new responsibilities. Jack approached her at the coffee machine, pouring 2 mugs, his grin radiating support. "You really captivated them, Emily. They've never seen such passion for education," he said, handing her a cup. "Thanks," she replied, trying to mirror his enthusiasm. Yet, as she took the steaming cup, her thoughts wandered to the board member's biting question. What if she didn't succeed? Was her vision of change just an optimistic fantasy? That night, after tucking her daughter into bed, Emily found herself hunched over her laptop, drafting a detailed proposal for the first project initiative, a mentorship program for at-risk children. She relished mapping out the landscape of opportunity, but then she hesitated. What if it was all for naught? The self-doubt began to creep in again. Pen hovering above paper felt insurmountable as the outlines of failure and inadequacy loomed in her mind, just waiting to snuff out her efforts. Just then her phone buzzed, a text from Jack. How about a brainstorming session tomorrow? I believe we can nail down the mentorship initiative and tackle any challenges. You've got this. Tomorrow, she thought, one step at a time. It wasn't just about pushing through her doubts. It was about building a resilient strategy that could withstand scrutiny and unexpected outcomes. She decided then to lean in further, not just to her fears, but also to the support around her. The next day at work, Emily entered the conference room feeling lighter, buoyed by the hope Jack and her colleagues provided. She saw a circle of colleagues gathered and recognized the warmth of teamwork taking shape again. They were eager, sharing ideas, grappling collectively with the obstacles that lay ahead. As they discussed potential mentors and partnerships with community organizations, a new thought struck her. This was not strictly her fight, it was a shared mission. The beauty of collaboration dawned on her, revealing paths she had overlooked in her single-mindedness. Everyone brought unique experiences and wisdom that would enrich her vision. But just as enthusiasm was taking root, the discussion veered into logistical peril. What if we cannot secure enough mentors? One colleague posed. They were fast-tracked into familiar fears. An internal churning began as Emily listened, not to the solutions, they fed the anxiety, but to the echo of uncertainty that lingered like a shadow around the plans they were forming. That familiar worry nagged at her, but this time she chose to confront it head-on. What if we don't have enough mentors? She countered, surprising herself with her own assertiveness. Then we search for them. We reach out into the community. We explore unconventional options. The words cascaded, seemingly insignificant in the meeting, yet inside her they took root and spread like a wildflower breaking through cracked pavement. She began mapping out alternative mentorship strategies, digital platforms, peer mentorships, even parental engagement. Once ignited, the energy in the room shifted. Ideas flourished, and with each contribution, Emily felt the cognitive dissonance cracking further. The discussions rolled on, sliding from fear to possibility. Accommodation of failure was part of the process and would lead to growth. The challenge lashed against her instincts, but she now saw it not as a chain, but as an invitation to expand. The very risk that frayed her confidence became the crucible for her transformation. As they wrapped up and agreed on the initial steps, Emily felt light, unburdened. She had again reached out to those she once feared would judge her, and in that opening came her validation, not just from them, but from herself. The shapes of uncertainty began to look less like obstacles, and more like markers along the path of her journey. But even as the cloud of accomplishment began to gather, she caught a glimpse of something darker circling back, a reminder that while community offered support, there would still be critics lurking. Emily's experiences had taught her resilience, but one question lingered. Could she keep channeling that resilience as she led the initiative forward, especially when the naysayers struck? In that moment, while she tried to ground herself, a new email notification flashed on her screen. An urgent message from the board chair. The gravity of the subject title made her heart race. Proposal review, concerns raised. That familiar tension tightened her chest. What awaited her within those words could undermine everything she had just built. As she clicked open the email, uncertainty flooded back. Would she be able to combat this new challenge, or would it test her newfound confidence like never before? Emily's breath caught in her throat as she opened the email, her eyes scanning the lines of text that seemed to pulse with urgency. The words flowed, punctuated by questions that felt like knives, slicing through the tapestry of her confidence. The board's concerns focused on the methodology of her proposed mentorship program, questioning its feasibility and the projected outcomes. Unrealistic expectations. Each word echoed in her mind, amplifying her anxiety. It was a critique that cut deeper than she anticipated, sending vivid reminders of all the times she'd been second-guessed. The images of those moments glowed uncomfortably, feeding into an all-too-familiar spiral of self-doubt. She willed her hands to stay steady, but the urge to push the laptop aside, to hide from the fallout, was overwhelming. Instead, Emily's focus shifted inward. The pressure was immense, but she clung to the threads of resolve she had recently woven into her daily routine. She recalled the energy from the meeting, the creative momentum they had tapped into. With a newfound clarity, she began to draft her response. Not a defense, but a vision that could address their concerns. Consolidating her passion and ideas, she outlined additional data to demonstrate the program's effectiveness. Statistical support for mentorship approaches and successful case studies began to fill the page. She had envisioned a dream. Now it was time to back it with facts. Each word formed from determination, a fierce pledge to turn this critique into an opportunity. Typing faster now, Emily paused only to catch her breath, savoring the taste of her belief that mentorship could change lives. The board might be skeptical, but skepticism could give way to curiosity if she provided a detailed roadmap. She reiterated the potential spillover effects a successful program could foster throughout the community, presenting the mentorship program as not merely an act of service, but a strategic investment in the future. Just as she prepared to send the email, her phone vibrated once more. It was a message from Jack. "Hey, I saw the email from the chair. Want to meet later to brainstorm some ideas? You can't let them get to you." His words were a warm comfort, grounding her amid the spiraling uncertainty. "I'm okay," she texted back, though she knew she was only half convinced. She would not face this fight alone. Surrounding herself with those who believed in the mission turned her instinctive fear into drive. The hours faded as Emily continued to revise her proposal, and by late afternoon she uploaded her response with a mixture of apprehension and relief. It was out of her hands for now. She had shared her vision, fortified it with evidence, and admit it or not, she was now committed to a new kind of vulnerability. That day, however, brought an unexpected turn. The board requested a follow-up meeting to discuss her proposal further. Just as swiftly as hope had begun to lift her spirits, trepidation intertwined with excitement begged to pull her back down. A presentation, a chance to directly address their concerns. The prospect sent her mind racing. She could sense the magnitude of the moment approaching. Emily spent the evening pacing, rehearsing her notes, internalizing key points with fierce determination. Somewhere along that tireless path of preparation, the weight of expectation transformed from looming dread to a battle call. She would harness that expectant energy. Each heartbeat matched her thoughts, action becoming conviction, conviction becoming presence. As she lay in bed that night, exhaustion settled in, but it was intertwined with an invigorating thrill. She was on the precipice of something enormous. It wasn't just about winning over the board. It was about proving, first to herself and then to the world, that she could lead change, forge paths where others saw barriers. With the sun barely peeking over the horizon, a new day arrived, ripe with potential. Emily could feel it resonating within her, but lingering questions loomed heavy in the frame of her mind. Would she rise to the challenge the board had set before her? Could this meeting be the tipping point that determined not just her initiative's fate, but her own? As she stepped into the office, she caught the glint of Jack's supportive nod. He would accompany her to the meeting, a chosen ally in this critical moment of her journey. But as she moved toward the conference room, a chilling realization struck her. It wasn't just the board she had to convince. Critics could be lurking closer than she imagined, even within her own ranks. What if one of her colleagues, wrestling with their own insecurities, didn't buy into her vision? The stakes felt higher than ever before. As she squared her shoulders, preparing for the clash ahead, Emily fully recognized the truth lurking. To emerge victorious here, she must not only defend her project but also silence the inner voices that threatened her resolve. With that thought reverberating within her, she opened the door to the conference room, bracing herself for what awaited her inside. Emily stepped into the conference room, the cool air hitting her face like a jolt. The board members were already seated, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism that only served to quicken the pulse in her temples. She forced herself to make eye contact, noting their varied postures. Some leaned back, relaxed, while others were rigidly straight. Each stance resonated with unspoken judgments. As Jack settled beside her, she felt a sliver of solidarity break through the tension, even as her heart raced. She had rehearsed every point meticulously, each statistic and success story crafted to counter their previous critiques. But now, as she drew closer to the impending confrontation, lingering feelings of inadequacy echoed like a taunting refrain. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here to discuss the mentorship proposal," she began, fighting the tremor in her voice. With one deep breath, she unfolded her notes, stealing a moment to ground herself in what she believed. This wasn't mere rhetoric. This was her vision, one that could reshape lives. She launched into her presentation. As she spoke of her methodologies, she carefully cited data that showcased proven outcomes of similar programs. The details rolled off her tongue, but doubt clawed at the edges of her confidence. Would they see this as just another pitch, or could they grasp the transformative potential? A board member interrupted, his brow furrowing with a question that pierced straight through her carefully erected defenses. How can you assure us that the participants in your program won't just see it as a time commitment without real investment in their growth? Emily hesitated, the question igniting flashes of her own days as a mentee. She recalled how her own mentors had carved out pathways where she once saw walls. It's all about creating a culture of accountability, she replied, her voice steadier now as experience ignited the passion behind her words. Participants won't just interact with their mentors. Monthly feedback loops will ensure engagement and mutual investment. It's integral. As she elaborated, the atmosphere shifted. Heads began to nod, and she caught a glimpse of interest igniting in their eyes. Yet, in that moment of victory, a tightening dread pulled at her stomach, a reminder that not everyone would be convinced. A familiar face from her team, Linda, spoke up next. The delicately veiled skepticism in her tone sent a chill through Emily. While this sounds promising, aren't we stretching our resources too thin? It seems ambitious, perhaps, even impractical. The moment felt like a trap snapping shut. Emily forged ahead but faltered as her words faltered. Addressing challenges was part of leadership, but facing criticism from within her own camp stung acutely. The room buzzed with anticipation, eyes flicking between them. I believe that ambition is the catalyst for change, Emily said, gathering her thoughts like a protective cloak. When we invest in mentorship, we're planting seeds for long-term growth. We're not just focused on short-term returns. Just as I grew from the mentorship I received, others can too. Linda, I understand your concerns, but imagine what we could achieve together if we make this commitment. Jack's supportive gaze anchored her as she shifted her focus back to the board. But as she concluded, her mind spun with a nagging realization. The real challenge wasn't convincing others. It was proving, even to herself, that she was worthy of this fight. The board stared back, expressions unreadable. Silence punctuated the air, thick with anticipation. Would they embrace her vision, or let her effort dissolve into doubt? Just then, the board chair leaned forward, eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Let's move on. What does the timeline for implementation look like? Emily's heart skipped. She hadn't anticipated a question about logistics so soon. As she started sketching out potential timelines in her mind, a thought struck. These moments were revealing her own capacity for resilience, for flexibility. The meeting was far from over, and as the discussion unfolded, Emily could feel each question tightening the noose of her anxieties. Yet around each of those curling strands of doubt lay a shimmering path towards clarity and engagement. Strength blossomed in her resolve as she confronted this uncharted territory, eager to embrace the growth that lay on the other side of this trial. As they transitioned into logistics, her confidence surged. She found herself thinking less about defending her project and more about engaging in a solution-focused dialogue. But even as she laid out her vision, one thought whispered insistently. Was she ready to face the true nature of resistance? A challenge that might come not from the board, nor from her colleagues, but from a place deep within her psyche, where imposter syndrome thrived. The discussion took a turn towards actionable plans, propelling Emily to consider the broader implications of the feedback. But she would need to prepare for the true test, the moment when she would have to quell the doubts that loomed over her, perhaps from unexpected quarters, perhaps from within herself. What if this meeting led her to revelations she hadn't anticipated? The time had come to face the deepest questions lurking in her mind. Are you willing to rise above the murmurings of doubt? Unmoved by fear, but driven by purpose, Emily knew she was only beginning to uncover what she was capable of, and that journey, fraught with perilous discoveries, was just taking shape. Emily's heart raced as she stepped out of the conference room, fresh from the meeting with the board. She felt a cocktail of emotions flooding through her: relief, uncertainty, hope, and an unshakable determination. Sure, she faced questions and critiques, but she had held her ground and fought for the vision that sparked purpose in her life, and now held promise for so many children. The most critical takeaway was how she had risen to challenge both herself and the expectations others placed upon her. Days trickled by, and she found herself buried in work as the first phases of the mentorship program began to take shape. Not only was she designs and strategies solidifying, but the vision had transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. She coordinated outreach to local organizations, connected with potential mentors, and rallied community support. Each step taken felt like a definitive push against the fears that had long restrained her ambitions. With every new partnership established, her confidence surged. The very act of making decisions that directly impacted lives ignited a fierce fire within her. She was no longer merely a maid, but a catalyst for change. Emily refused to let anyone, including herself, strip away the realization that she was capable of greatness. She decided to bring Lily into this process as well. On weekends, they would volunteer together at local schools, showing children that ambition was not only an option but an expectation. As they engaged with the students, Emily was proud, seeing her daughter embody the same spirit of grit and passion she herself embraced. With every smile and every shared experience, she stitched together a firm foundation not just for her daughter, but also for herself. Then came the day of the official launch of the mentorship program. Emily stood in front of a small crowd, the promise of the future gleaming before her. She felt every heartbeat echo around her, her fears bubbling under the surface, but they didn't serve to diminish her. They invigorated her spirit. As she spoke about the ambitious goals they could achieve together and how they would create pathways for children, it was clear she was speaking from a place of conviction, and that kind of authenticity was palpable. Everyone present felt it. Her passion transformed the space as much as it changed her narrative. Emily had evolved from uncertainty into a figure of authority and leadership. The response surpassed her expectations. Local businesses pledged support, mentors embraced the vision with enthusiasm, and soon a network began to blossom around the people who would take part in the journey. Emily's fears of inadequacy had been silenced, replaced with a recognized competence that had once seemed so unattainable. Jack was there that day, pride etched on his face as he quietly absorbed the impact this transformative project was making. Later, he approached her, congratulating her on what they had accomplished. In that moment, she realized this was no longer just about his redemption. A shift had happened. It was about her success and subsequent empowerment. With a sense of closure wrapping around her, Emily acknowledged the irony that the challenges she faced had become their collective motivation. Their intertwined paths had led to profound personal growth for both of them. She had stripped away the fear of being defined by her past and had embraced a future that pulsed with promise. As she returned home that evening, her daughter's warm hug ignited a wave of fulfillment within her. She looked down at Lily, whose eyes sparkled with admiration. "Mommy, you changed things for those kids." The statement echoed in Emily's mind, a reminder of the profound impact of action, how the ripple of one person's voice could amplify change. In that moment of connection with those simple words, Emily knew she had arrived at a new level of self-actualization. She had achieved her goal, not just for herself or for Lily, but for a generation yearning for opportunity. Basking in the afterglow of the launch, she recognized something powerful and transformative had taken root. Her courage, to speak, to lead, to inspire, had manifested in ways she had never imagined. She had conquered doubt, had faced challenges with resilience, and emerged into a version of herself that was capable, confident, and celebrated. This was her reality now, one defined by her desire to uplift others, to embrace her own journey, and to ensure her daughter would always reach for her dreams, knowing her mother had forged a path of strength and hope. And now, the future lay open before her like a sprawling canvas, a reflection of her journey, filled with colors that danced in vibrant promise for her daughter and countless others. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss these exclusive life-changing stories. Leave a like now to support the channel and fuel our future in-depth narratives. Comment below with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Emily's journey and the unfolding adventure ahead. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need a dose of inspiration in their lives. Your support matters. Empower others to believe in their potential too.